foundational principles of American life is this: you should be free to speak your mind. This is one of the primary things that you need to understand about American life. So when people talk about illegal speech, which is the subject of today's Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics, by the way, this is the Daily Summation in case you hadn't figured that out. And I am your host, I'm Kurt. Today is Friday the 23rd of April of 2021, and welcome to everybody who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, YouTube, or for that matter, anywhere else. Again, the subject of today's video will be illegal speech. I wrote a note, and it said, it's not saying something that's illegal. It's the result that may be illegal. Now, to be fair, there are certain things you can say that will be illegal. That's truth, that's reality, that's how that is. But, and I'm just going to say this, it's really mostly pretty ridiculous that it's illegal to say anything. Rise up, Americans, and take over your country. That's incitement, right? According to most people's way of looking at things. Yet I can just be saying that in a way where I'm not telling people that they really ought to do it. And if somebody takes it to be something that they really ought to do in a physical, forceful way, that's not really on me. That's on them. Oh, you incited them to that. Well, but the thing about it is, if I said that, what if what I was saying is, look, people, you need to work to make sure that the appropriate people are elected to office and appointed to various positions to make it such that your country is the place that you want it to be. I can use that language, and it may sound incendiary to you, but guess what? It's just language. It's just me talking. And here's a more important point to me. When people say things, it lets you know who they are. If somebody tells you all Jews ought to be exterminated, you probably ought to really be looking at that person and saying, that is not a good person. It's not difficult to understand or figure that out. Okay? If you force them into silence, what will happen instead is that person may potentially act on what they believe instead of speaking about it and actually getting into vibrant and vital discussion with other people to convince them of why they're wrong. Okay? You literally might cause somebody to not turn a corner as a result of the fact that they cannot say what's on their mind for fear of being charged with indictment or verbal harassment or verbal threatening or whatever. Okay, there are points, disturbance of the peace and various things of that sort, where after some fashion you might say that a person speaking might do so illegally. Okay, that's true. If you have a person who every Monday morning at 5 o'clock in the morning gets up on his soapbox with his bullhorn and yells in a neighborhood somewhere, that person is disturbing the peace regardless what he or she is saying. It's not the saying that's the problem, it's the doing in that instance. When and where they do what they do, that's disturbing the peace. Okay, that's a different thing, and I don't have a problem with that. I want to take Mr. Bongino's statement that we have become not men in this country a step further, and I want to say we have become not robust human beings in this country, whether you're a man or a woman. Now, to be fair, I do understand Dan's point, and I do agree with it. I believe that men in the modern day are not acting as men ought to act. Look, I'm acting, I don't want to get into detail, but right now you could argue that I'm acting as a single dad to my son. I'm not going to get into the details of that. We're not going to talk about what happened, why it happened, what's going on, or anything else. But regardless what's going on, whether it's just that one parent is constantly at work, or what it happens to be, my job as a dad is to do exactly that. Well, this is sort of stepping off the point, but what I'm getting at here is this. When people say things and they say, I'm going to kill you, for example, it's one thing if they do it. Then I think you should rightly not only be able to charge for murder or whatever, but you should be able to charge for incitement, or not incitement, but what's the word? Assault, verbal assault, right? Okay, great. But when a person says, I'm going to kill you, and then walks away and never sees the person that they were talking to again, how on earth can you call that assault and be reasonable in what you're saying? How? Why would you take that person, potentially put them in jail or cause them some other sort of punishment as a result of a moment of anger? Now, to be fair, and this is my personal opinion, you as an individual are responsible for what you say and how it affects people. I'm not trying to say that that's not true. I'm not trying to say that. What I'm trying to say is your responsibility for that is yours. It's not government's, it's not police officers. When a person says, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to murder you, or I'm going to hurt you, or whatever, and then that person walks away and never has another thing to do with the individual that they say that to, counting them guilty of verbal assault is at very best questionable. And I'm here to tell you something. Illegal speech is at very best questionable 95% of the time, if not more. People say things every day that they don't mean, or that they say in anger or whatever, that really ultimately the effect of it is nothing. And yet every day people are told, yes, you've done something illegal by talking. I've already covered elsewhere in various things that I've talked to, various places, in discussions with, any number of people, the idea that the yelling fire in a crowded theater thing is not a thing. And again, I'd like to credit, I think again it was Dan Bongino for bringing that up, the fact that the case literally was over, the decision was literally overturned 40 years ago on a 93-year-old case that was a bad case to begin with. Okay, I'd like to say though that I think that we're well past the point where we're way past snowflake for many people, and particularly men, right? When somebody says something to you, that's not a reason to consider what they, the fact that you don't like it is not a reason to consider what they say illegal. It's just not. It's time to start growing up and realizing that people are going to say things, and that lots of the things that they say they're not going to mean. But the other thing is, like I say, when you meet somebody who does say something and really seems to mean it, now you know who that person is, and you know how you should deal with that person in general. That's the reality here. You have a choice. You can ignore that person, you can pay attention to that person, but not assume that they're actually going to follow through on what they say. You can pay attention to a person and look for them to potentially fall through. But if you take that person and make what they say illegal, it's in direct contradiction with what the idea of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution was about. Freedom of speech being abridged. That wasn't just something that was designed for government. The amendment might have been, but the idea was not. People should be free to speak because it lets you know who those people are, and it lets you know what path they probably need to go down in order to help them to become better people. And maybe they won't. Maybe that won't happen. But there's only one way to find out, and that's to try. I'm not going to tell you that there's absolutely no instance in which illegal speech should be a reasonable thing, is a reasonable thing. But I am going to tell you that the vast majority of the time, that's not reasonable. Making speech illegal is not reasonable. I'm going to go rob a bank. If you ever see me going and robbing a bank, that's a problem, and you might use the fact that I said that as proof of the fact that I had intent to rob the bank, which may move my crime to another position. I'm not going to rob any banks. I don't have any intent to do that. That's nothing I ever want to do. But the point is, making the speech saying I want to rob a bank illegal is problematic. When they do sting operations, if they're using what somebody says as opposed to what they do, so for example buying guns, drugs, whatever, then I consider that to be problematic. That's actually entrapment to me. When somebody does something wrong, then it's another matter. All right, I need to go ahead and wrap up, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Again, this has been the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I am your host. I am Kurt. Today is Friday, the 23rd of April, 2021. Tomorrow will be Saturday, the 24th of April of 2021. Thanks for coming here, whether on Rumble, on the podcast, or on YouTube, and listening to my little rant. Subject of today's discussion has been illegal speech. Tomorrow we'll be talking about not their parent. And this is a very important thing. I think a lot of people, particularly who are working in public settings, need to keep in mind. I'm going to go ahead and wish you the best of days and hope that things are going well for you. Today is Friday. That is in many people's mind this evening, the start of the weekend. So hopefully your weekend will go well and your final day of work for this week, if you're working a standard work week, will go reasonably as well. And hopefully we will get a chance to see you on tomorrow's Daily Summation. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Friday, April the 23rd of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, and maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.